All right, so I wanted to welcome everyone to our monthly.
Oh, they're just starting to come in.
Okay. So we wait.
Yeah, we're waiting for the attendees to come in. There they come.
I got it. Are you going to screen share that, John? Is that your plan or?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my plan. I'm gonna put it up and
Okay.
we'll talk through it. So, yeah.
Hey, Dave Livingston.
So can we look at how many participants we've got? We got a pretty good number.
Dave's razor's broken again.
Yeah,
I don't see the number jumping, so I assume we're stable.
looks like it.
Okay, so it's after 5 o'clock. It's 5:02. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is our monthly meeting of the El Dorado Hills Community Council, held this day, Monday, June 7th at 5 p.m. And with that, I'd like to do a leadership roll call and then recognition of District 1 commissioners and committee members present. So I'm going to go down the list. I've got them listed here on the top of the agenda. John Vania, would you please introduce yourself and your role?
Yes, John Bania, Planning Commissioner, District 1, as well as the lead on infrastructure.
Thank you. Richard Ross.
Richard Ross, good governance, following government activity and trying to understand it.
Well, you got a big task there, Richard.
Yeah, because when you get that one figured out, let us all know, will you?
But one needs a challenge in life.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, Chief Lilly.
Yes, good evening, Michael Lilienthal. I'm a deputy chief at the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. I chair the Public Safety Committee. Essentially, I try and connect any of our customers that have a problem with either police, fire, CHP, or the appropriate person to help them resolve that issue.
Very good. And Glenn Krakow, are you with us, Glenn? I think you're there,
Yes.
right? Yes.
I am. Hi, everybody. Glenn Krakow. I am with the Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee representing our district.
Okay, I know Sita was going to be absent, so we'll move on to John Davey.
Sure. Hi, John Davey. I'm the chair of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee, and we're a resident group of volunteers who examine proposed development projects in El Dorado Hills and provide feedback to project applicants in the county.
Very good. And Tim White.
I'm Tim White. I'm the vice chair of APAC, and I also serve on the fire department board of directors.
All right, very good. And Cindy.
I'm Cindy Mund. I'm Supervisor Hydal's assistant, and I do the community information and outreach for the community council.
Excellent. So can you tell us what other District 1
let's go there.
commissioners and committee members we have present? Because I can't see that.
We've got Tita.
Tina, would you please recognize your role?
Unmute, Tita.
Okay, this is Tita Bladen. I'm on the El Dorado County Commission on Aging.
Thank you, Tina. Anybody else you see there?
That's it.
Okay, if we've missed anybody, my apologies, but I always want to make sure people know who our volunteers are working for us in the commissions and committees as well. So with that, I'll move to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Does anyone on the leadership team have any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we're going to accept the agenda as delivered. With that, we're going to move to item 3, public comment. This is the segment of the meeting. I would encourage anyone in the public who has an item that they would like to present to the commission, either as a comment, a question, whatever. If it's not on tonight's agenda, now is the time to speak to it. If it's on tonight's agenda, please hold your comment till we get to that section of the agenda, and then we'll recognize you as part of the public comment. So any public comment in general at this point in time, items not on the agenda.
Hey, John, this is Kirk. I don't have an agenda in front of me, but
Okay.
One of the issues that we're working on, I know, is you and I talked about a week or so ago, is these new fire safety regulations that are coming down from the state, and they are an unmitigated disaster for El Dorado Hills and El Dorado County in terms of unfunded liability. It's kind of interesting. I read the bill today that created this thing, and it's that SB 901 from Dodd that really had more to do with rescuing PG&E from bankruptcy and some forest practice stuff. It's about 2 paragraphs on fire safety stuff. We're dealing with regulations, proposed regulations that come from that are about 85 pages long. We have Andrea and I are meeting with Mo and Ron, I think Thursday, to talk about it some more, but there's a real fire bell that's probably the wrong analogy, but there's a real bell that we need to ring on this one, because I think there are significant unfunded enforcement mandates. And frankly, you may find yourself in a situation where you can't even issue a building permit in some circumstances if you're on a new substandard street. So anyway, it's something, John, I know you and I chatted about the other day, and there are 5 bullet points in the legislation relating to this regulation. And as I said, the proposed regulation is about 75 pages, 60 or 70 pages long. So it's something y'all better take a look at. And then I think the comments are due June 22nd. And the Board of Forestry is on tap to adopt these things by July 1. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Supervisor Parlin brought that up at our budget hearing today. The issue related to how do we do forecasts with all these things, because that could be a major departure from what we're planning right now for things like property tax growth, et cetera. So
Yep.
it does affect our budget. It affects our ability to provide services, and all of the unfunded mandates end up being, okay, we have to take away from something we wanted to do to something we're required to do with no additional revenue coming in to support it. So we have the pleasure of having our county council with us this evening, David Livingston. So he's going to be one of our guest speakers, but I'm sure he's in the midst of that whole thing as well. There's just a lot of turmoil at this point. So I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, and Kirk, I can just let you know, so RCRC, of which the county is a member, has been really tracking the issues on these new fire safe regulations, and has been very vocal in advocating for the interests of rural counties such as El Dorado. So you're right. There are concerns with that, and there's some definite interest from the larger county organizations to address it.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, we in the development community can shout until we get blue in the face and out of breath, but I think there's a fairly common approach to this circumstance that between the fire department and the county, we can work on together in the next couple of weeks. I mean, the key bullet point is fire apparatus access. We've got that in most of El Dorado Hills right now, but it's the other 68 pages of stuff. So anyway, I'm looking forward to meeting with Mo. I think Natalie Porter is scheduled to be at that meeting as well, but we can go in and shout all we want, but if our local fire department and local Department of Transportation aren't in agreement on an approach, frankly, we're probably wasting our time. So anyway, I look forward to continuing that dialogue with some key folks in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. So I see Joel Wiley has his hand up. Joel, there you go. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I think I'm unmuted. Now for something completely different. I got a notice from the county to relicense my dogs. And there was one line on it that said, go to the animal services page and do it electronically. Well, I tried every link on that page and none of them came up with a way to take the fees. I sent a note to Animal Services about it, and they said up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little hamburger for a drop-down menu. It's there. I think it really should be on the same page, rather visible, as you have a link on the letter. I would think it beneficial to put it on the Animal Services page, the front page there. And if not that, at least on the renewal, the license renewals, to have it at least the actual page for it. I did find it on the how do I off the main page, but that was after I paid the fees.
Ooh, okay.
And I have one other thing if I still have time.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Regarding Saratoga and Finders Way, has anybody looked into the possibility of making that a roundabout?
That has been discussed, but the circulation there doesn't warrant it, is what I'm hearing from DOT. We are going to have a separate discussion that APAC is helping host on the whole Finders Way Saratoga process and what needs to happen there and what we can do to monitor data. But our understanding is that DOT is recommending that not occur till August, and that's unacceptable to me. So I just found that out today. We have to recycle our request and see if we can't get that advanced. But there is going to be a separate public meeting that APAC will be involved in kind of co-hosting. So you can look forward to that discussion. I just don't know when.
Okay, it occurred to me that a roundabout would be a lot cheaper than a wrongful death suit. That's all I've got.
Very good. Any other thoughts, Joel?
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And I'm not seeing any other public comments at this point, unless you're seeing something, Cindy?
No.
Okay, so with that, let's move on to item 4, our guest speakers. And we have the privilege of having 3 guest speakers this evening. Phil Mossbacher, who's our elected county surveyor, David Livingston, who's our county counsel, and Aaron Magezi, who's the deputy CAO reporting to Don Ashton within our CAO's office. And the discussion is going to be around the El Dorado County redistricting process, the timelines involved. Phil's going to show you some stuff on the website, but I did want to mention that the county hosted last Friday, essentially a webinar, a training program that explains to the public how they can get started in identifying communities of interest. And then there's a subsequent meeting that's scheduled in August. We're going to have a total of 4 meetings, but they'll present all that. But we've gotten started. That's the message I want to let everybody know. We had that first public interchange. And so this is to promote that happened last Friday, and then provide information, links, et cetera, that anyone who's interested can get active and in our redistricting process. So with that, Phil, you're on the screen, and obviously David and Aaron. So Phil, do you want to lead off from here?
Sure. I'll just start by thanking you for inviting us. And tonight's discussion, Aaron's going to take the lead on the first part. And I'll show you some of the things we have on our new app, that research app that's available for the public. And Dave will help out on most of the legal matters that we can't get. I won't be able to get in detail if needed. So with that, I want to pass it on over to Aaron. And Aaron, you batter up.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to first start by thanking you, Supervisor Heido, staff, leadership team, and District 1 commissioners and committee members present for the opportunity to present today with their team from El Dorado County. So I'll start off by just going through the redistricting process. I will just walk you through this. If you give me a minute, I will put up the PowerPoint and share that with you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Aaron. I should mention while you're doing all that this culminates in December of this year. The board has a responsibility to take action on the redistricting no later than December 15th. So that will probably be done at one of our 2 December meetings, either December 7th or the 14th. So we are scheduling that, but it is a fast-paced activity. When you look at it from the standpoint, we're not going to have all the information we really want until September. But we can do this pre-work, get it started, start looking at communities of interest. And that's why we're kind of going multiple paths with trying to get it introduced at this point. So. Aaron was gonna.
Okay.
Hey,
So you finding all the right clicks, Aaron?
I'm gonna get there. Thanks for your.
We might be able to help.
You should.
You got it. You got it. Yeah, it's coming. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start off with what is redistricting? The United States Constitution requires a count every decade, 10 years of everyone residing in the United States. After this count, also known as the census, district boundaries must be redrawn to ensure that districts are substantially equal in population. In El Dorado County, this process is conducted for Board of Supervisor District, those that represent you, like Supervisor Hello for District 1. Redistricting, we pretty much follow the guidelines of the Fair Maps Act. We use 2020 census data. We will use that data once it has been released. It has not been released yet. We also have community of interest outreach, which can begin prior to the receipt of the census data and the drawing of the maps to provide outlines of the process. So the mapping factors, and this is something that probably Phil will be able to speak more to, but in order of priority, the highest priority is geographic contiguity, which is ensuring that all the boundaries are uninterrupted. And from a layman's standpoint, this means not uninterrupted by either water or other natural occurring obstacles. The geographic integrity of neighborhoods and local communities of interest and cities or designated census places. Natural and artificial barriers, including streets and boundaries of the county when practicable. And it encourages geographical compactness. Now, it cannot be for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party. Additional criteria can be considered as long as they are not in conflict with or outweigh the criteria required by the state and federal laws. Communities of interest. We haven't been able to draw a map yet since the data hasn't been received. However, we can collect information on communities of interest. Communities of interest, the definition of is it's a neighborhood, community, or a group of people who have common policy concerns and would benefit from being maintained in a single district. What do you and your neighbors share in common? What makes your group unique compared to the surrounding areas? So communities of interest, they are important because they keep communities of interest together, and keeping them together is an important principle in redistricting for governmental representation. Community members can define their communities by telling their own stories and describing their concerns to policymakers. The process timeline. It's not showing up on that slide, but our process timeline is broken out into two distinct data collection points. One is the pre-census, which is waiting for the community of interest input, which is the period that we're in today. As Supervisor Hilo pointed out, on June 4th, we had our first workshop, and our next workshop is going to be on August the 4th. It's going to be an evening meeting. And the next data collection point, if you will, and implementation point will be after we have the data. September 30th, we expect or anticipate that the data would be delivered. October the 3rd, we would have another workshop. Then we'll have a fourth workshop in November. And then around mid-November, we should have a map hearing. And then this will culminate in December, by December 15th, when we would have the deadline for adoption of the map. We would like to, I think, Phil, have a demonstration to the extent that we can of mapping and the process that you have. So,
Yes.
thank you.
All right. I'll jump in when you're done
Sharon,
sharing.
you have to stop sharing. You have to go up to the stop share button.
All right, I'll jump in with my screen. This is our, are you guys seeing an outline of the county?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So this is our web research app that we have for redistricting. It's very, very similar to our GotNet website, but it's a lot of information's been trimmed out. You won't find soil types like you would find in GotNet, but it's just the areas or layers that we thought would be pertinent to the redistricting process. And we can add more if somebody needs more, we can bring in more layers. And this website, where it lives, there's a few ways to get there. It's lives on the elections department, and you can come in from the county front page. And let me navigate to that. So that would be here on this across our banner. That would take you there to the redistricting page. And this redistricting page, this is the web page for the entire process with explanations. And that lives on the elections site. And you can get to that from the elections menu directly also with the county redistricting, and that'll take you there also. And so with right here on the front page, let me get back here. Again, this is the redistricting web page that is on the county site. And we have frequently asked questions. We got a schedule of our meetings, how to get involved, some more general election information. And later on, when we have the draft maps, they'll be available. And then other links to, if you want to research how the redistricting process works. And we have our timelines that are down on the website too. So our mapping tool that we have, or research tool, I like to call it, is under the Get Involved tab. And I'm just going to take you right to the map drawing site. We do have detailed instructions on how to work the site. And again, if you're familiar with GotNet, you would see a lot of similarities. And so this is the instruction page. Let me bail out of that. And then we have a link that'll take you to the drawing site, which is here. And again, we have all our layers. And right now we have the county outline. You can bring up the supervisors districts as they exist now. You can, and if you wanted to just see the progression over time of our district boundaries, you can turn on, turn off to see where the districts used to be in the last redistricting and the one previously. So if you want to just see how things have evolved, and you can see, especially in the Lake Tahoe up in District 5, it slowly worked its way down the hill and to where now it's all the way into Pollock Pines. And so there's our current boundaries. We have layers. We can bring up the road system, which is a good way of knowing where you're at. I'm going to turn off the district boundaries. And then we have, those are the major roads. We have minor roads. And something else that's pretty interesting is we have the census blocks from the previous data set from the 2010. And let me zoom in a little bit.
So Phil, you're rolling the mouse scroll, right? When you're doing this to zoom in and out, isn't that the technique?
That's correctly. I'm doing that. And I believe we have the plus and minus feature that you can use too. Here it is up
Okay.
here. But I am rolling my mouse. And then we, just to give you an idea what we will expect when the data is released on September 30th, we will have the census block information. So that would be the line work there. These are the census blocks, and as you move in closer, they'll have population counts. And from what I understand, the block boundaries will be the same, but the numbers will change. This is the way it was in 2010. So that's really good information as you're doing your research. And then as you pull back, then the numbers fade, but you see more blocks. So good information. And a lot of things I wanted to make sure we had on this is as we get ready to define the boundaries, folks would want to help, or they want to make some decisions based on areas that have already been mapped. So for instance, we have a lot of districts. We have the business parks, mobile home parks is they're there. We have the entire city boundaries and perimeters. And then if you want to zoom in a little tighter to your areas of interest, we have zones of benefit. And there they are. So I'm just showing you the multitude of layers that we have. We have ag districts, fire safe councils. These are communities that are acting together. And then we can, if you want to look at your EID and your water and so on, we have quite a few districts that we can map as part of your research, and school districts. So it's a good research place. So Aaron mentioned the communities of interest. And so we have to, when we come up with our new boundaries, we're not supposed to just start with where we left off and just warp them until we get our numbers to match, because the numbers, the population counts in each district, they have to agree within 10% from the largest number to the smallest number. So the counts have to hit. And so that means the boundary lines will move to where you can find your population group. So if the numbers are, you need 50 people, then you would move the line to go get 50 and so on. And it'd be based on the census block boundaries. So when we when we're working on the new boundaries, we want to make sure we maintain the integrity of the neighborhoods. We wouldn't necessarily want to split, definitely won't split Placerville. We may have a community that we wouldn't want to break up, or even it could be even all the way down to a subdivision. And so we have all these mappable boundaries already. And so we're required to give the public the opportunity to define their community of interest that they don't want to be split up, and they want it to be all in one. So for instance, up in, I say this, in Grizzly Flat, there's the Grizzly Flat Original Homesteaders Association, for instance, and they have a mappable boundary. They could come in and say, I want that to be my community of interest. And so we've developed a tool where the public can draw their own community of interest. And so I'll turn on the community of interest. I think we've had one submittal so far of a community of interest. Where was it? I think it was at Cameron Park. Here's one right here. Someone submitted, and I can tell who it was by asking the question. Looked like the Homeowners Association for the Buckeye Rancheros. They drew the boundaries of what they thought should be a community of interest, and have that boundary honored when the lines are drawn. And so we're looking for public groups to come forward with, to add their own boundaries that we can consider. We don't have to live by them, but there's a group here that believes that this line should not be moved up and cross their district or split it, or their community. And so the tool we have is, we have a mapping tool up here, up on the upper right. Let me bring up a few more things I want to bring up. We have the parcel base is also in here. So that'll help the public drill into very tightly to their area. It's regenerating. So to draw a community of interest, from one end, you have to have this layer on, and then you select, you want to draw a new community of interest. And I'm not going to go through the entire process because once I hit submit, it's in the system. And so if I had, for instance, I wanted a community of interest to cover this area for whatever reason, I would have a community of interest. And then then at that point, you can talk about what generalize the name for your community of interest, what state, county you live in. No. Are you resident? Yes, I guess I should have said. And your email address optional. And then you can describe what social economic interest makes you a community and why. Just tell us more information and briefly describe why the boundaries of your neighborhood, or you can map them. And there's a lot of options that answer the question. Then when you're done, you can then you save it, and then boom, it's in. And that will be considered when we draw our boundaries, work on our boundaries. And there are ways to, if you messed up, you can edit them. And if you messed up, just give us a call. We'll help you edit it on that. So that's a little bit about the community of interest and our research website. And that's what I have for you there on our research tool. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Phil. It's an excellent presentation, a great tool. Obviously, it's one that clearly an expansion of what we've been doing with our GS system and stuff. And so I think this has got huge applicability to a number of different things that people are interested in, not just redistricting. So thank you for sharing all that information. Just before I open it up for comments, I was just going to ask David if he had anything he wanted to add at this point.
Certainly, yeah. And I'll just, reinforce that, the primary reason that Phil's team developed that tool was to assist with the identification of communities of interest. As Aaron had went through earlier, other than geographic contiguity, communities of interest and maintaining the integrity of those communities of interest is the most important factor that we'll be considering when we ultimately do get to the point where we have census data and are starting to draw district boundary lines. So this tool should hopefully allow people to identify their communities of interest that will become a big part of the map drawing exercise later. And also just want to note on the Get Involved portion of the county's redistricting webpage, if somebody didn't feel comfortable playing with the mapping tool, there is a kind of just a survey that one could provide where you could describe in narrative terms how you identify your particular community of interest. And so that's another way that members of the public could get involved in order to provide us information that will go into the ultimate map drawing exercise when we do get the census data in September.
Excellent. So with that, let's ask for any questions or comments from our leadership team before we open it up to the general participants. Very good. Not seeing any. I hope we're all going to get engaged and start working with our communities of interest and define those. I'll just bring up an example. I asked the question, does the El Dorado Hills Business Park constitute a community of interest, even there's no residents in that community? And the answer is yes. And so that is one of the mapping layers you can look at Because I know we've had difficulties in the past where District 1 and District 2 splits through basically the middle of the business park. I'm not sure that's the best answer to represent that community of interest, but obviously those are some of the things that people can express their opinion on through this tool, right? If they want to see the El Dorado Community Services District boundaries tied with the business park boundaries, tied with whatever, right, as a community of interest, you have that ability to define those and submit them as part of this process. So much appreciated. So not seeing any leadership team comments. Let's open it up for general participants to comment or ask questions. I see Joel has got your hand. You got your hand raised. Go ahead, Joel.
Back again. When you put out the minutes of this meeting, could you put a link into how we can actually get to those pages? Because I was trying to go in through the website. I was having trouble finding it.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can give you a link to the exact GIS website where all that information is. I think we actually have a redistricting web page that we have opened up as a special link. So that's where we would direct you unless you want to just go to the tool. We can send it kind of in two layers of links. One is the general web page, and then the other would be the GIS tool if that's the only thing you're interested in. So yes, good idea. Thank you, Joel.
Well, I seem to have trouble finding things on the county web page.
Yeah, well, what I found is if you Google it, sometimes give you a link that I can't find in Legistar or anywhere else, but it's, yeah, so we do have search engine issues and other things that are part of the built-in system that we're trying to evolve and change, but it's a slow process. So I appreciate your comment. Any other questions or comments on redistricting? All right, not seeing one. That means you guys did a great presentation because everybody is very pleased with what's going on and they want to, obviously on their own time, start participating and get their first round of inputs in before our August meeting. I would hope that would be the collection point where we can say we've had so many inputs that have been made, and at least we're starting to understand that data as we move towards the September timeframe when ultimately we'll get the real numbers, and then the work really begins in trying to define redistrict boundaries or district boundaries in a new context. And my understanding, the team that's been assembled is going to bring back to the board at least 3 different options or alternatives.
Yes.
So it's not going to be 100. It's not going to be one. There will be, several options, and then there will be some information on each of those, I guess, in terms of the primary benefit of an option versus the second option versus whatever. So we can all look forward to that happening at some point near the culmination of this in that November or December timeframe. But a lot of interesting things going on. So again, I want to thank our 3 guest speakers. Really appreciate your time this evening and the presentation. You're welcome to stay, but I know you all have busy lives, so you're not obligated certainly to stay. But we appreciate the effort you put into this and look forward to looking at the net inputs when it's all said and done. So thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so with that, let's move on to the next item. And that is supervisor communications. And I had 3 items this evening that I wanted to highlight some of the activities going on there. The first one is the Central El Dorado Hills Specific Plan, recirculated draft environmental impact report. This is the second RDEIR that's come out. And I've asked the Parker Development Company to kind of share a summary of that. I do have some slides I want to present, but we've had 2 public meetings of significance. One of them was hosted by APAC, where there's presentations made. The other was hosted by our Planning Commission, where comments were made, questions, but the Planning Commission made no decision. So both of representatives of APAC and our Planning Commission are present with us this evening. So maybe I should just turn it over to them to make any comments that they would like relative to those 2 presentations before we allow representatives from Parker to go ahead and kind of give us a summary. So let's start with John Davey, since you had the first intro into this at the APAC meeting. Any summary comments you'd like to make or questions?
Well, in terms of summary comments, and I talked to Kirk about this on the phone the other day, at our meeting this week, and we'll talk about it when we get to the APAC section. Well, we appreciate the presentation that was made to us. It was informative in terms of, why the recirculated draft environmental impact report was presented, and some of the extra elements that were added for it, not just the VMT data, but the two different additional project alternatives. And we'll have comments from our subcommittee at the meeting on Wednesday. But it's consistent with what Kirk and Andrea have explained to us. And again, at the Planning Commission, I sat through that workshop as well. So it's informative for residents, and I think our subcommittee will have just some basic comments. There's nothing ground shaking or there's no drama. How's that? But no, it's a big project. You got to get your arms around it. You got to understand all the moving pieces. So we appreciate the time that Kirk and Andrea spent with us.
Yeah, it's a specific plan. That's why it's a really big project, right? Because typically a specific plan is a culmination of multiple projects when they really come into the final design phase and implementation. So thank you for your comments there, John. John Vania, any comments you'd like to offer from the Planning Commission review?
Yeah, we just provided some additional clarity, and it was good because we have had a couple of new commissioners, so it was good for them to sit in on the workshop. So we appreciate the presentation from staff and from the applicants as well, from Kirk and Andrea. So just provided some extra clarity to the alternatives like John had mentioned, as well as just clearing up any misunderstandings about what the project is. So that's all.
All right, very good. So with that, Kirk or Andrew, either one of you want to just give us some general comments? I know you participate, obviously, both of those public reviews. So any general takeaways on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think some of you have heard this before, but I'll kind of go through it again. As y'all will remember, we had a series of public meetings at the Planning Commission in late 2019 and early 2020. And it culminated, I think, in January of 2020 with the Planning Commission hearing up down here in El Dorado Hills, and that I walked out of that meeting thinking there was about 4 boxes that we had to check before we could talk about this again in any meaningful way. The first box are subjectly related to the CSD's interest in perhaps acquiring the property or working out something with us in terms of the property. And we had a series of meetings, some formal, some informal, some just a quick phone call, sometimes a whole group of us. But the CSD released a letter in November of 2020, and it's several pages long, but I will give you, for those of you who haven't heard it or need to be reminded of it again, this is a direct quote from them. Bottom line, consistent with the CSD's evaluation of the property at the highest and best use in 2014 at a price of over $20 million, Parker's Development's valuation also exceeds $20 million. Therefore, the CSD's effort to acquire the property has resulted in a conclusion that this represents too high a price. Given remember, this is a letter coming from the Community Services District, current and future resources, and we believe that the community's future cannot be mortgaged against the single property. So that box, in my mind, got checked. And then the letter fairly chronicles the conversations that occurred throughout 2020. The date of it is November 19th, 2020. It was widely circulated within the community. And if you don't have it, give me a call and I'll make sure you get a copy of it. The next issue that emerged, as Commissioner Vania knows, is that the state of California has decided, ironically, as part of some CEQA legislation relating to the construction of the Golden One Center, that's how things happen in California, that traffic would be evaluated in an entirely different way. It had more to do with, as Natalie Porter said, the impact on drivers rather than the capacity of intersections. So the state regs went into effect in July. The state mandate went into effect and said, as of July 1, 2020, you shall evaluate projects for CEQA purposes, not general plan purposes, but for CEQA purposes, with the VMT guidelines that are outlined in Senate Bill 734 743, subject to the locals adopting their particular goals and standards. The Board of Supervisors did adopt some standards and goals. I don't know if it was in November or October of last fall. That then allowed us to move forward with the VMT analysis, which is part of the recirculated draft EIR that was sent out by the county planning staff, I think April 30th. I'm not going to even pretend to be an expert in VMT, nor am I going to try to explain it. All I can tell you is that the conclusion that's encapsulated in the RDEIR is that we meet the standards that were required by the state for the county to establish in terms of vehicle miles traveled from that particular project. So we spent quite a bit of time on that, and that really wrapped itself up. That kind of checked box number 2. Box number 3 was kind of another conversation, and I think Supervisor Heidel is going to talk a little bit more about that later. But one of the things that we heard was don't change the zoning of the project. And I think there was a little confusion out there about the general plan designation for the golf course, which is open space, as opposed to the underlying zoning, which is RFH, recreational facilities high. Now, the underlying zoning had existed on the golf course property. I'm gonna have to segue into some other pieces of the proposed project as well, for as long as we can remember. However, with the TGPA ZOU being adopted in December of 15, which for those of you who are around, and that was right after we began the circulation of the draft EIR for this project, really refined and defined the kinds of uses that were allowed in that particular zone. Now, that ordinance or that action was subject to some litigation, and I believe that the actions that the board took in December 15 passed legal muster sometime in 2017. So in response to the community, we heard from the community, we went back really in the spring and summer of 2020 and said, okay, as it relates to the old golf course, what kinds of uses are allowed there that don't require rezoning? And there's a good list there. It's things like Top Golf, hotels, things related to kind of a recreational facility, a pool, those kinds of things. So that really becomes, but I'll stop there for a second. We then took a look at the other 2 parts of the project, which are the ridge up here in the El Dorado Hills specific plan of Serrano, which is Village D1 lots C and D, as well as Pedregal. And those of you who are familiar with Village D1 lots C and D, the specific plan that still exists for Serrano today contemplates 135 units. So we threw that into the existing zoning alternative, and then we went to the Pedregal property and said, what can we do with the existing zoning? The existing zoning in Pedregal has existed, I don't know, for 25 or 30 years. When we prepared the initial project back in 2015, we encountered some real constraints, primarily on trees in Pedregal. The county then adopted an oak resource mitigation plan 2017. Everybody shake their head if I've got the date wrong, which allowed for a different approach to developing that property and a way to mitigate your way out of tree impacts. With that new information, we then came up with the proposal that's included in the alternative for the zoning consistent alternative. So you really had 3 pieces of information that played into the zoning consistent alternative. One is the significant refinement and understanding of the kinds of uses that were allowed and with the existing zoning on the golf course. The existing specific plan for El Dorado Hills specific plan, 135 units on the Ridge and D1. And then the Oak Resource Mitigation Plan or ordinance, which came into effect which affected the land uses in Pedregal. So that's how we responded to that particular concern. And there's three pieces to that. And I suspect that the folks who live in Village D1 adjacent to C&D probably have a different take on what should happen on the ridge as opposed to perhaps others. And I would guess those over in Ridgeview would probably have a different take on what should happen in Pedregal. But the proposed project, which is the one that we're talking about, which is one we've been talking about, takes a Village D1 lot C and D and turns it into open space. And in the case of Pedregal, I think it's 37 custom lots and a couple hundred multifamily units, which is consistent with what's adjacent, which is there now. The other piece of that, and this kind of just emerged again last summer, was we were approached by a national company that does senior housing projects. And they expressed a fairly sincere enough interest in building a continuing care retirement community, or a CCRC, on the land on the south land of the golf course project. That is the land between Serrano Parkway on the north and Highway 50 on the south. So that seemed to be a legitimate offer from a legitimate user. And we figured, we came to this meeting and we were asked to evaluate or think about alternative uses. Now, that proposed project probably goes back to square one with the CEQA document because it's nowhere near the project description. The zoning consistent alternative would be a project by project, or I don't know that it would be a specific plan necessarily, but it could be a tentative map on Pedregal, a tentative map on lot C and D, and some kind of a parcel map which would create the parcels necessary to do a top golf or a couple hotels or those kinds of uses related to RFH. So that's kind of the summary of where we are. And I know several of you have heard this several times before. I hope I didn't say anything different or confuse you. What I want to emphasize is that we would prefer a project that utilizes the existing CEQA document and looks kind of like the project that we proposed. Now, does it have to look exactly like it? Does it have exactly the number of units? No, but that would be our preference, is that you had a project like that. So with that, John, I think I've got this speech down pretty good. I don't know if it gets longer or shorter as I give it, but it's pretty much what I've suggested to APAC and the Planning Commission. So if you all have any questions on that particular part of the presentation, either Andrea or I will try to answer them, although frankly, I'm not even going to wade into VMT from a technical standpoint. So anyway, any questions?
Thank you, Kurt. And I would like to present the charts that I have that came from planning, and then we'll open up for questions, because some of the questions that may come off the chart, you would be better prepared to answer than I. But the one thing I want to acknowledge is that the public comment period for RDEIR closes June 14th. Is that the correct date?
I was just looking at that. in the RDEIR. And that's the case. One other point I forgot to make, thank you, John, is that CEQA requires in your alternatives analysis that I'm just going to read directly from this, and several of you heard this before. In addition to a range of alternatives, an EIR must discuss the no project alternative, which describes the reasonably foreseeable probable future conditions if the project is not approved. In other words, if the proposed project is not approved. So the truth is, the zoning consistent alternative really becomes the no project alternative. But since the initial document had a different no project alternative, which didn't reflect the changes from TGPA, ZOU, and the Oak Resource Plan, we just decided to call it zoning consistent. But in my mind, and I believe in a CEQA practitioner's mind, that would be the no project alternative. I was just looking that date up. I think you're right, John. It is, well, the release date was April 30th and it's 45 calendar days, I think. So that sounds about right to me.
Okay, because I want to emphasize that's the reason why we're having this review again. There's still time for the public to make comments on some of the things we discussed tonight. But as of June 14th, that public input to the RDIR will be closed, subject to public reviews at the Planning Commission and through the board, et cetera. But now's the time for the public to comment on the RDIR, should they choose to want to do that, so.
Yeah, and I think the plan is, I believe the schedule that we're working on with staff has us coming back to the Planning Commission, I think, in late September. And that could be off a couple of weeks either way, but I'm guessing, as far as I can tell anyway, there's no reason to think that we couldn't make that data. I think it's September 23rd is kind of the target date for the Planning Commission hearing to deal with that. Bana, you may know more than I do about that, but that's the date that the staff has given us to kind of block our calendars for.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, and hopefully this is going to work. Okay, it is working, very good. So to try to eliminate confusion, because I know that this is a very complex project that's been mentioned, I asked our planning department to contrast 3 specific areas, for contrast and compare. And they're broken down into some of the things we've talked about. The first one here is the former executive golf course. The second one that we'll look at is Pedregal. And then the third one is Toronto Village D1. Because those 3 areas of the project probably have different inputs from the public, depending upon what your view of what you'd like to see in your neighborhood or on the golf course or whatever. So I think it was important to try to define primarily what are the differences between the zoning consistent proposal as an alternative and really the proposed project. Proposed project is the baseline. The alternatives are considered. They don't have to be accepted, but in this case, that zoning consistent alternative that's been mentioned is really the default, no zoning change provisions for what can be developed. Emphasize can, it's not guaranteed, on the particular property. So that's why I went to our planning department and asked them to please give us those kinds of definitions so that we would know how to address them depending upon what your area of interest is. So this first one in the summary identifies on the left-hand side the zoning consistent alternative 4, and it talks about, there's no dwelling units involved with the zoning consistent other than the fact it would have art, recreational facility, high use, active recreation. It's 63 acres, and there would be a number of applicable items: tennis and aquatics facilities, sports fields, indoor and outdoor entertainment, hotels, amusement park, general merchandise. Each one of those, per our current TGPA ZOU, has a defined requirement in it as to whether it's an allowed use by right, whether it is a administrative permit required to implement that, or whether it requires a conditional use permit. And it varies depending upon the type of use. So without complicating the chart, I just wanted to address the by right stuff first, which are really what we call the P in each of these areas, and then talk about the administrative permit, because those are the 2 things that can happen quickly, as opposed to a conditional use permit, which have to go through discretionary review, approval, conditions can be added, et cetera, et cetera. But under the allowed use right now with what that property is, hiking and equestrian trails are allowed. Parks in terms of day use are allowed by right. Picnic area is allowed by right. Private recreation area is allowed by right. And I think there was one more here. Let me flip the page. Actually, a couple more. Commercial recreation arcade is allowed by right. Indoor entertainment is allowed by right. And that's it. So those are the ones allowed by right today, nothing required. Then you get into what are the administrative permit requirements. And those include nighttime use of parks as opposed to daytime use of parks. They include a public swimming pool. They include a public tennis court. They include outdoor entertainment, outdoor sports and recreation, health resort and retreat center, and seasonal sales. So again, those are administrative things that are fairly simple typically to get processed and then be able to go ahead and implement the program. The more difficult ones, as I mentioned, are required discretionary review. Those are what we call a conditional use permit. Conditional use permits includes campground, a golf course, which obviously was approved several years ago when it was first implemented. It includes recreational vehicle park, which you haven't talked about, and I would hope it wouldn't become a recreational vehicle park, but it's a possibility per our zoning. Large amusement complex. So if it's a large amusement complex as opposed to indoor entertainment, and I don't know exactly how to draw those definitions, but large amusement complex would require a conditional use permit. Food, beverage, and general merchandise sales would require a conditional use permit. Hotels and motels would require a conditional use permit. So that just adds to the complication that there's kind of 3 layers here in terms of what the practical uses could be with the zoning consistent proposal or alternative that's here. So I know that's confusing to people, but it's important to understand it. So when we go back to the chart, we talk about, there's no bike trail involved with the zoning consistent. When you look at the proposed project, what's being proposed is 763 dwelling units maximum. It's on and there's a 15-acre CST public park that's included. And there is a new class 1 bike path included as part of what's being proposed. So the slide 4 gives you all of the acronym soup. So I'm not going to try to go through and define what village, high density, multifamily, and all those things are. There is an acronym table because you'll see that there's differences in the nomenclature between the proposals that are made currently and what was done more from a zoning consistent perspective. So I'm not trying to confuse it, but again, that's another layer of definition that goes into that. So again, you have to go to the 4th slide in this sequence, and we'll put all this out on our email when we put out the minutes with the links to it stuff, because I just got this late this afternoon. Because obviously it was a work in progress until recently. So those are the 2 contrasts for the former executive golf course, whether you want to see residential dwelling units there or allow some of the uses that are defined here with the 3 different conditions. So moving beyond that, actually the second one here is Toronto Village D1 instead of Pedregal, so I'm going to stay with their flow here. Under the zoning consistent alternative 4, as Kirk mentioned, there's 135 dwelling units that would be allowed by right to be constructed. There's a D1 road connection would be made, and there's an inclusion of a 5-acre church site included in that zoning consistent alternative. When you get to the proposed project that's before us, all of the 135 dwelling units for Toronto Village D1 become open space. There is no connection for the roads, and there's an 11-acre park or civic low use, civic and light commercial type designation. 11-acre park was included. That's been identified as the facility that our seniors would like to implement. At least some of our seniors would, and working with our fire department and other agencies. And that was discussed at the District 1 review that we had relative to the development agreement at that point in time, and recognizing the development agreement will probably morph into something different after all this review is done as well. But it would include what was called the facility for the ages. So that's, I know, a dream of certain people. And then the last one here that's really the village perspective is Pedregal. And I have many friends that have been interested in the Pedregal development, having living up slope of that Pedregal unit up in Ridgeview and other areas. So again, this contrast, what is that zoning consistent if it were developed, consisting with the rights of today, what it would be versus the proposed project. So here we see in the zoning consistent 519 dwelling units that would be proposed. There would be a connection to Reddick Way, there would be connection to Gillette Drive, and a connection or OS buffer over open space buffer to Ridgeview is included, and 7 acres of private parks. So that's kind of the one extreme. The other is the current proposed project. which would be 237 units. And I think you mentioned 37 plus 200 in your comments, Kirk. So I think that's obviously consistent. No connection to Reddick, no connection to Gillette, no open space buffer, et cetera. So again, this is a high level summary, but it does kind of contrast the opportunity of looking at what this proposed project is versus the zoning consistent alternative, which becomes essentially your no project alternative, which aren't giveaways. I mean, there's still conditions, as we mentioned, that you have to go through to accomplish those, but that's kind of the summary that planning was able to put together. These are the definitions that go with that. The V addition just stands for village. Obviously, so if you're talking about residential high, it's village residential high, village residential medium, et cetera. Open space, recreation facilities high. We talked about that as the prevailing zoning in the golf course area. High density residential, multifamily, and then village residential low. Medium, low, medium, high, medium, low, and low. So anyway, those are the acronyms that go with it. And so with that kind of as a summary, I'd like to open it up for questions now to the leadership team. First of all, anyone who has questions on what's been discussed as a kind of a summary, overview, perspective, questions or comments, let's open it up for that at this point. Let me stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing here, and then you'll be able to see everybody, I think. So, done. Okay. So not seeing any hands raised by our leadership team, because I know a lot of you have been involved with this for several weeks, months, years, whatever the category is. So let's turn it over to our attendees then. Are there any comments or questions from any of the participants that aren't on the panel this evening? So, Joel, I'm surprised you don't have a question, but okay. All right, very good. Well, again, Kirk and Andrea, thank you very much for your support of this presentation. Again, it's all trying to provide clarity. It's trying to let the residents know the choices that are out there. It will evolve through the Planning Commission hearings, and ultimately it will come before the Board of Supervisors for a decision on it. But I think we've done, what we can to try to make it as clear as possible, given the fact that it's a very complex project. So that was my obligation, is to try to provide clarity into what the choices were for our residents. So if they want to subscribe to something like no zoning, then they understand what that means. So again, big help. So with that, I think we'll conclude this portion of our discussion. So again, thank you for your participation.
Thank you, John, for inviting us. And as always, we're available for questions if ever anybody has them. So.
All right, very good. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the second item, results of the board budget hearing, which was held today. The board took action on 7 specific items to approve moving forward the budget activity. The last item was to direct the chief administrative office to return no later than June 30th of this year with the recommendation to adopt the fiscal year authorized personnel allocation resolution. So that's the next step that would happen in that time frame, no later than June 30th. So that's happening, but the basic budget is $681 million, which is 5% less than what it was last year. I know that's unusual, but this is a unique situation where we actually have an approved budget or moving towards approving a budget that's less than it was the previous year, but there's a number of reasons for that. It does provide general fund contingency of $6 million, which is a board requirement, general reserves at $10 million. Again, a requirement designation for capital project set aside at $5 million. And this is the new thing, allocates $3 million in discretionary revenues to road maintenance in accordance with the board's most recently adopted budget policy. So the board is now taking direction to basically, given the fact we can balance everything as we go forward, provide $3 million of additional resources out of our general fund to go to the road fund for road maintenance. That number needs to be twice what it is to really start to work into this. So we're really doing the best we can at this point with the $3 million of authorization, but it's a step in the right direction. So hopefully that will prevail. In terms of general fund appropriations, that's $337 million, which is 3.2% less, or $11 million less than the previous year, and what the board had last fall. So all those things were results of the board hearing. And again, it's recorded. It'll be on our website to be able to listen to anything you might want to listen to. I was surprised at the poor attendance today. Light attendance, I'll call, not poor, but light attendance by the public. So I think that's a measure that the staff has done a really good job of preparing the budget book and explaining to people what's going on. And there's been a lot of discussions ahead of time, recognizing COVID was a special year and there's all kinds of changes going on and a lot of things there. But Legistar will have that actual video recorded on it. I'm guessing probably by tomorrow, but anybody interested in that? So any questions on that from the leadership team or the public? I'm guessing not. I'm not seeing any. Okay, so let's move on. The Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow, which is going to be a long day with a lot of different activities on it. But I just want to mention that we pulled off the scheduled monthly COVID update because of inconsistent direction and guidelines we're getting from the state. So to talk about what's going to happen when the county starts to reopen and all those things, we really can't do at this point. In a large measure, as was mentioned a little bit earlier before the meeting got started, when you look at our Cal OSHA requirements versus what the governor is talking about versus what the California Department of Public Health is talking about, they're not on the same page. And so a lot of us are waiting to find out, what does the governor really say on June 15th? Is he going to put out a new executive order that's going to override the controls of these other agencies? Is he going to defer to them? We just don't know. So we've tentatively talked about having a follow-up discussion as opposed to a discussion before June 15th, perhaps on June 22nd, if we get the definitions we're looking for and we need to communicate that to the public. But things like being able to reopen up our boardroom, we're starting to move down that path, but we don't have clear confirmation that we can do that or what the constraints are going to be. We have at least the Cal OSHA view, but we don't have the governor's view. And so there's a lot of that still up in the air. And so that's why we decided not to have the COVID update, because it will be relatively meaningless by the time we get the results, hopefully on the 15th. So, and the governor has, most of us now recognizes that he's going to maintain his executive emergency orders for the COVID even after June 15th. So there's a lot of things, like I said, still, what does that mean, right? So we're trying to figure it out, but that's the reason why we're not going to have that discussion at tomorrow's board meeting. Tentatively, we'll move it out to June 22nd. Hopefully the governor provides enough direction that we don't have to have a meeting, that it just becomes common knowledge and we'll put out a press release or something to cover it that way, but we'll see. So that's what I had for supervisor communications. Do we have any questions on that last item? Not seeing any. Let's move then to our leadership team progress reports. We always start with public safety. And Alex, is he on?
Yeah. Yes, Alex Martin.
Detective Morton, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine, thanks.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Alex Morton. I'm a detective with the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. I do have some stats for the past 2 weeks that include property crimes in the El Dorado Hills area. So, so for El Dorado Hills, the week of May 20th through May 26th, we had looks like a total of 10 cases out of El Dorado Hills. The week of May 27th through June 2nd, it looks like we had a total of 6 cases out of El Dorado Hills. Some of those cases I'll just go over real quick. Looks like we had a couple of bikes that were stolen from an open garage off of Beckett Drive. We did have a vandalism of like one of those little free library book stands. We had a couple shoplifting incidents at the local supermarkets there. And then we did have a few vehicle burglaries and also some vandalisms included, which means looks like they shattered the windows to get whatever the contents out of that vehicle. That really concludes kind of the past 2 weeks that we've had. No other real big issues that came up over the past 2 weeks.
Very good. Thank you, Detective. Any leadership team questions? Anybody have a question for Alex? Not seeing any. Let's open it up to the public. Are there any public questions of our sheriff's representative here? Looks like we have one. Right?
Joel, yeah.
Joel, go ahead.
All right, I haven't left yet.
Oh, okay.
Detective, there was an incident up in Serrano a couple, 3 weeks ago that seemed to have a helicopter and a cast of thousands. I never really heard what went on with that. Do you have any information on it?
I do know what you're talking about, and I actually don't have a lot of information on it either. That's because it involved a federal search warrant. So our federal partners executed a search warrant. I don't know really anything other than that, but that's what all that hoopla was about. Was just the feds were executing a search warrant.
Yeah, there was a lot about activity about it, but I never saw anything that was a follow-up on it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
And thanks for the information you give us.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for Detective Morton? Not seeing. Thank you again, Alex, for your participation in this event. Really do appreciate all the data and the updates and stuff. And because obviously I'm reading a lot of things in various things, journals and stuff about the increase in crime. And so, yeah, we're all concerned with that and how we best provide the resources to curb the growth of crime, particularly when we talk about gang actions and everything else. And I think we've been very successful in that in the past, but that doesn't mean that the tide doesn't turn at some point. So we always have to be aware of it and try to not encourage crime by leaving our garage door open and those kinds of things, which I've heard of bicycles and e-bikes and everything else that have been taken, stolen, if you will, because of people not understanding that they're a target. And people drive by and for any number of reasons decide they have an opportunity and then you lose something. So
yeah, no problem. Yeah, and it happens that fast, and that's generally kind of how it is. It's just as someone drives by and they just see an opportunity, and it's less than a minute, and a very expensive item is gone. So and yeah, I see the news articles all the time about increase in crime across the nation. Really, I think that we in El Dorado County are doing a very good job of keeping serious crime in check, and we're going to continue to do that. And we've got a tremendous amount of good people working for us, and we're doing the best that we can.
thank you again.
You're welcome.
So with that, I'm going to, we know that I guess we have no CHP report tonight because Officer Brown, I think, is occupied with other activities. So I'm going to move to Chief Lilly for our fire report. And we're starting to get into the fire season pretty good now with everything that's happening.
Yeah, we definitely are. That's for sure. Well, good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to present for the fire department. I do want to acknowledge first that Tim White, one of our fire board members, and Bobby Bennett, both directors, are both on the call tonight. And I think that's great. There's a lot of support from the fire department for these meetings and certainly be involved with the community. And I think that's good to see. It's a great month for the fire department. We have next week 5 newly hired firefighter paramedics that will begin their recruit academy training. And that's really important for us as fire season draws near and we start to send our firefighters throughout the state to assist on the large fires. It's really nice to have a fully staffed department behind them to be able to cover things here. And as we do send our firefighters out to the large fires, I always want to point out that we never decrease staffing to our citizens here in El Dorado Hills. We always maintain fully staffed engines. We hire people back in overtime and things of that nature. So, but good news for us to have some new firefighters coming on, and they're replacing some very senior employees that we had retire recently. So a lot of experience has gone out the door, and we're excited to have new people coming in to bring their experiences. We're also deep in the middle of getting ready for wildfire season. The crews have been out training. We've been out at Browns Ravine, just making sure that we sharpen our own skills for firefighter self-survival and ready to serve the community on any type of vegetation type fire. And then you will see, as you've probably seen, a lot of smoke in the air, a lot of news coverage on fires in the Sacramento area. And that really is because our fuel is ready to burn. So definitely we encourage you to get out there and clear around your homes. Give yourself that 100 feet of defensible space is what we're recommending. Our vegetation management program is going really well. We are out aggressively inspecting properties. This year, we hired some defensible space inspectors, and they are out looking at all the properties throughout El Dorado Hills. They're doing a great job. And we are experiencing people having difficulties finding contractors to do all the vegetation clearances. So we're trying to work with the customers on time extensions, but ultimately everyone can rest assured that if the clearance isn't done, the fire department will have a contractor come in and do it on behalf of the homeowner. And that project's going really well. And John, you kind of stole my thunder with the COVID, where we are trying to navigate the CalOSHA versus CDC versus the governor's actions that may occur on the 15th of June. So we are waiting for that as well. And I did want to report, since CETA wasn't here, that from a vaccine perspective, it looks like in our county, which has a population of just around 193,000 people, that almost 40% of the community is fully vaccinated. And it looks like almost 48% have had at least one dose. So here in the next couple of weeks, we'll have about 50% of the people that have achieved that full vaccine, which will help us with our case counts as winter comes near. So with that, that's the end of the fire report, but I'm open to any questions that anybody might have.
All right, questions for Chief Lay? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my question for you.
Yes, sir.
The issue of evacuation routes comes up when fire season opens up. And we have very few north-south ingress egress in El Dorado Hills. When I read the fire department's response to the central El Dorado Hills plan, I didn't see any comment whatsoever regarding impact on evacuation routes, etc. Questions then. One, does the fire department have any role in assessing evacuation routes? And two, are we at any kind of level of particular risk because of our transportation being so severely affected by our hills and valleys?
Well, good questions. First of all, thank you for them. So the good news about this is every single project that comes through the Planning Commission also comes to the fire department. We're allowed to comment on those. So each of those projects we do look at as one of a critical act, is the things that we're really concerned about is fire department access. So there is some regulations that are out there in both the fire code and the what's called the SRA fire safe regulations. All of them have elements of emergency vehicle access. In our local ordinance that our board adopts each year, we even take the fire code a little bit further and adopt more restrictive measures as far as it relates to access. So all subdivisions must have at least 2 points of access. And if they aren't spread out adequately enough, then we actually condition the project potentially to put in a third or an EVA. So from an access perspective, which also would serve as public safety evacuation, all new projects are looked at from that perspective and that lens. We also require all new subdivisions to have wildfire safe plans. What that means is along the roadway's edge, along the open spaces that are common, they must have the mechanisms in place for annual fuel mitigations. And they use a registered forester that actually comes in and studies the fuels, the topography, the layout of the subdivision, and helps us create a plan that all new subdivisions are required to follow. So really, I think from the fire department's perspective, our bigger concern is existing subdivisions that have limited egress, such as the Lake Hills community. And that's why we've been so active and involved with them in forming the fire safe councils that we try and support so that they do fuel mitigations in those areas. Did that kind of answer the question as far as you were looking at it?
Well, I think fire access is different than evacuation routes. I can appreciate how the same roads will be used for both, but in terms of evacuation routes, that tends to address the issue of multiple developments funneling into main arterials to exit the area of risk or perceived risk. And now that roads are being viewed as by vehicle miles traveled rather than congestion, it would seem that that issue has been kind of thrown out in the bathwater. And it concerns me because of where we live and the geography that impacts. I mean, the people who are going to flee from the Lake Hills, they're going to get down to Green Valley, and then do they go north? Excuse me, do they go east? Do they go west? Do they go south? And will the people who might be bailing out because they have bad information be impacting? And once again, when I saw what the fire department wrote on the Central El Dorado Hills plan, it said nothing about that kind of evacuation impact of all of these additional residents entering onto El Dorado Hills Boulevard. So it almost seems like we are sidestepping the issues that were identified in the two communities that were destroyed by fires not that long ago. So I'm not sure your answer really satisfied my question.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm happy to sidebar you on it and kind of show you what we do. But as far as the access, that's also going to be the evacuation routes for the people that live in the community. And then we do work with the sheriff as far as which way we funnel people out. We're less concerned about which direction, let's say somebody heads on Green Valley Road on an evacuation, as we are just getting them out of the area of immediate danger. And because of the dynamics of wind, and you never know what that's going to look like on any given day or the conditions at the time, we work with our sheriff in the moment at the incident command post to kind of guide cars out of the area in the right direction. So I guess I see your concern from the perspective of the citizen and a resident for sure. And like I said, I'm happy to talk to you more about it. But I know when we look at the subdivisions, we do require adequate access, which then, by default provides adequate exiting, as well as the mitigation of fuels along the roadway's edge. Really gives us a pretty high level of protection. But I do understand your concerns. And like I said, I share them, especially up in some of the existing subdivisions, namely Lake Hills, that would cause us a lot of concern. So but I'm happy to chat with you more about it and kind of show you what we use for planning subdivisions. I think you're muted.
I will add that going back, like 8 years ago, 6 years ago, somewhere in that frame, we ran a mock program out in Lake Hills to look at the evacuation sequence, how all the special agencies would respond, what our fire department was doing, what our sheriff's department was doing, what the CHP was doing, what the county was doing to evacuate pets, and in particular, any kind of livestock that had to be moved. There's a lot of that in Lake Hills, obviously, but you'd be surprised there's some. So that whole drill exercise that was run, I thought was a huge eye opener in terms of, are we really prepared? And the answer was, well, not totally. We have good resources, we have good communication, but there's a lot of things that still need to be worked out, including at that time, our code red alerts and reverse call downs and all of those kinds of things. So I would hope that our fire department is planning some future drill like that, an exercise, and not necessarily repeating Lake Hills, but do it in some other very highly, maybe it's Lake Ridge Oaks, or maybe it's Marina Village or something or other, but run another exercise where the public gets a chance to understand what's going on, because I share your concerns. You get out of a given intersection and there won't be a CHP officer there telling you which way to go. And you're going to have to make a choice. And so if you're not getting updated communication through various communication methods like code red, or tied into some kind of a communications network that's telling you an evacuation, this is the way the fire is spreading, and the real-time information is going to be critical. But by the same token, you don't want everybody going the same direction and blocking up the roadway when there are alternate egresses that you can get out safely and get to a different part of the county, and then decide where you have to go from there. But we're still in the planning phase where we've talked about egress routes, evacuation routes, but we really don't have a plan because of the wide variety of things that can happen and the complexity. If you have a plan that says always go turn right, turn left, get out of here, that may be totally contradictory to what happens in a given event, a given incident. So you have to be somewhat flexible, but I think the key to preparedness for each individual is know what you have to grab and go with. Be prepared with your go bag. Be prepared with understanding the evacuation routes available to you. And if one of them is blocked, you have to consider and make a judgment. Which of the alternatives are you going to use? But I do think it would be helpful if we had another event in our community, another drill. To get people a little bit better prepared and understand what it is. And those take a long time to plan, so it's not going to happen this year, certainly. But I thought that first one that we ran several years ago was really key to better understanding the limitations of what we had working. And a lot of those ends up being communication. Is the communication what it needs to be to get people out safely in the right direction? And the answer then was no. In a full evacuation, we don't have all the communication we'd like to have. So I know that's improved over the years, but anyway. Chief.
No, good. Those are great points, John. And I was there at the exercise. I was in 2012, and it was what formed the Lake Hills Fire Safe Council, and really good drill, a lot of good positive progressive steps occurred from that. And I guess it's really important as a resident that you know more than one way out of your community in case your primary route is blocked. And again, our sheriff is reluctant to publish straight evacuation maps, which we've talked to. The OES function at an incident would tie in with the first arriving fire officer and start making decisions about the way to evacuate the public. And a lot of the reason why they're hesitate to publish a map that says turn left, turn right is simply because you don't know what the wind conditions are going to be at the time, what the fire behavior is going to be, and what direction it's moving. And it changes greatly in the different parts of the community. As you get closer to Folsom Lake, where you have larger, taller trees, it's much more dangerous than in center of El Dorado Hills, where you have just, annual grasses. Those change your risk model. So the incident commanders, the firefighters, and the police officers that are there, the sheriff's deputies, they do a good job of analyzing all those variables in the moment and starting to make the recommendations on evacuation. But so for your comfort level, it's a topic we discuss monthly at our different meetings throughout the county with our partners, the different fire agencies and CAL FIRE and the Sheriff OES function. And really, there's never enough. We should always be trying to get better at this. This is something we could always try and improve on. And I just want you to rest assured that it's not a topic that's taken lightly by all the leadership throughout the county.
And we'll mention the fire department is hosting a strategic planning session, which I'm sure Tim White is locked into. I've basically responded, I would like to attend, having been on the board in the past and understanding the community. John Davies going to attend. And that's where I think those kinds of discussions happen. When you get into SWOT type of discussions, what are our weaknesses we're still struggling with today? What are the opportunities to improve those things? Recognizing it's usually a multi-agency answer. It's not any one organization that can do it all, right? But at least we can promote, we can recommend, we can advocate for. But I'm looking forward to that strategic planning session because I think it will give us some key insights in terms of what are our weaknesses. And that's not only from the public's view, that's from the staff's view, which is probably most important, the boots on the ground, right? In terms of where do we have these things that we should be prioritizing and addressing, because if something starts in those areas, it's going to be catastrophic. You're not going to be able to stop it quickly. That's the terrain we live in. That's the environment, the fuels that we're surrounded with. So a number of different things. Again, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for our public safety aspect of things? I've not seen any, so that's good. So let's do reverse order tonight, just out of grand. So I'm going to let Cindy go with community information outreach, and then we'll work our way back up to economic development, just to change the title a little bit.
Okay, here we go. Scramble, get my stuff. Well, this time I'm going to try and start going back to the way I used to talk about what was happening in El Dorado Hills, because things are starting to happen again, which is super exciting. The El Dorado Hills CSD just had their fishing derby this last weekend, which was a huge success. It was the second annual, and I go by and there was just so many kids and families out there enjoying a great time. There's food, and it was just a great community event. So that was neat to see happening again. And starting this week, the El Dorado Hills Town Center is going to be starting their concerts every Thursday again, which is super exciting. Those are a lot of fun. I talked to them today regarding that. They didn't tell me any kind of what they were doing for as far as distancing and stuff. So I guess we'll see. But they are starting this Thursday. So that's exciting. And El Dorado Hills CSD is also starting their concerts, their summer concert series, and their first one is going to be June 25th. So things are starting to happen. So that's very exciting. So that's,
We'll talk about some of our new businesses in the letters
Oh,
we're putting out, because that's.
gosh, I completely forgot about that. We also, that's another exciting thing is we have quite a few new businesses that have been opening in town center. I don't know if you've, in and around town center and in El Dorado Hills. The Wow Wow Lemonade over there in Bass Lake area. The new pet store in the town center. They were giving away free washes for your dog, which is really neat. Gone there with my dog a few times. And then there's another, gosh, I didn't write it down. There's a new one coming up. Do you remember the
There's
name?
a chicken
Yeah, it's a,
establishment. I can't think.
yeah,
of the
there's a
name of
new
it.
chicken establishment. I should have had it in my notes. I apologize. But they're coming up. So it's a lot of things are really starting to happen again, which is great to see. And town center apartments should be opening pretty soon. So
Right. For the first, amount of occupants, it's going to be a phased opening, but yeah, they're getting close.
yeah, so that's gonna be great for all the businesses around town center. So that's neat to see.
So the other thing is we are sending out letters to the new businesses that are coming into District 1 in particular, recognizing and welcoming them to our community. That was something that Don Ashton had initiated as our CAO as part of our economic development plan. And we're continuing to do the same thing within District 1 to make sure that new businesses know how to contact us if they have issues that come up or something that we can do to help promote their business, recognizing the chamber does a lot of that, or El Dorado Hills Chamber if it's in El Dorado Hills. But to be part of that business community to a greater extent that we have been in the past, and recognize that we're not discouraging businesses. We really want to see good paying jobs and new businesses come to El Dorado Hills in particular, but El Dorado County in general. So that's one of the things we're continuing to pursue. So thank you, Cindy, for those comments. APAC, John, you got a meeting this week.
Or something. Real quickly, the chicken place is Roost Stars with a Z.
There you go.
That's
Stars, yes.
Yeah, and they're going in the town center marketplace over there by the Chipotle and
Thank
all
you.
the stuff on. Yeah. So at APAC, let me make sure I have the right notes in front of me. Our meeting this week is on Wednesday. We'll start at 7 o'clock. It's virtual. We have the link available on our agenda, which is published on our website at edhapac.org. We have just a couple of topics to review. We have a subcommittee finding/report from our Central El Dorado Hills Specific Plan subcommittee. John Richards done a lot of work on that. And basically, it's, some of the things that Kirk had mentioned that, we understand that we're looking at a very narrow thing with this recirculated draft environmental impact report. We're looking at primarily the vehicle miles traveled and the proposed alternatives, but we also understand that the alternatives as proposed are not projects. The project is still the project, and we'll have our subcommittee address that a little bit. The other thing we're going to talk about is the Carson Creek Specific Plan Amendment, the Heritage of Carson Creek Specific Plan, which is going to be at the Planning Commission on Thursday, and just some highlights of what that development agreement looks like and what's been proposed to address some of the concerns for the specific plan, the concept of the specific plan amendment for the changes there. Another item is our White Rock Road Noise Study Report Subcommittee, and that's a mouthful. They did have one additional letter that they sent off to the JPA, the Capital Southeast Connection JPA, and I spoke to Derek from the JPA today on the phone. So we'll have some information about that. And then the last thing is really, it's informational in terms of that Supervisor Heidel had mentioned it at the last, I want to say the APAC meeting. The EDH Costco and the EDH 52 commercial development at Silva Valley, right there at the Silva Valley Parkway US 50 interchange. I did speak to Mike DeBroda from Costco. They're not ready to share the plan publicly, but just that they have their application in. I can't find it, of course, on the website anyplace in the county, either through, obviously it's not Legistar and it's not on the Track It. So, but we do have just a brief update of sort of the things that we already know, just to let our meeting attendees know that this is still a project that's being pursued and sort of the approach that it's sort of co-applicants are taking. And so that'll be at our meeting on Wednesday, 7 o'clock. One of the I'll throw in real quick is that I did go ahead and link on the APAC website, the redistricting page. So if you want to go to edhapac.org/redistrict, it'll take you to the county page. So that's
Thank
live
you.
right now.
Much appreciated.
Tim, is there anything you want to throw in on that?
Yeah, Tim.
Oh, yeah, I think, John, you should mention most of our meeting is probably going to be the Rayleigh's application to put an awning on back of their store so people won't bet when they pick up their groceries. I mean, that's a controversial subject, so it should take.
There's about, I'm looking at my inbox right now, and I have about, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8 things flagged that are very similar. So,
okay.
Yeah, if we have time, we'll mention those. APAC probably doesn't have time to review those. They're conditional use permits and things like that that don't take a lot of input from APAC.
I fully agree.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's move to Healthy Communities. He is not here. I just want to mention that our health department COVID departmental operations center is closing. So we've gotten past the phase of the county being integrally involved with pushing out the vaccines and coordination. It's now state operations for the most part, and people seeking to get vaccinated can still get vaccinated, but the county is not the focus for that. They went to a single provider type of website, and so it's being run at the state level as opposed to the county. So we have closed out those activities, and so you're not going to hear any updates relative to that. Mike commented on the vaccination process a little bit, so I'm not going to belabor that. So let's go to good governance. Richard, anything you want to talk to? I talked a little bit about the budget book, but good governance.
I thought we're certainly more capable and understanding of the budget factors than I was, although I appreciate Cindy sending me that material.
Okay.
The interesting, I think, the last several supervisors meetings, I'm trying to follow topics that have come up and to maybe repeat some of them that might have been of interest. One of the things I see very frequently is health and human service activities in the county are really very frequently ongoing, and I think maybe not fully realized by the citizens how much engagement is going on those topics, and it's kind of satisfying to see that level, particularly for child supporting things and mental health that are going on in our county. And you know, unfortunately, if it's not a crisis, it doesn't get any vision, isn't looked at, isn't appreciated. And I do think that's something that kudos to the county and the appropriate staffs. And then I'll just conclude by saying, listening to tonight's meeting relative to the El Dorado Hills Central Plan and the details of that, and then the sophistication and the details relative to redistricting. The challenge is, how does one keep the citizens' interest on those topics when they seem so esoteric, so deep in detail and history, that the first reaction probably for 75% of everybody is to kind of throw up your hands, go to next door and complain about something. So it's a tough business you're in, and well, that's about all from good governance tonight.
All right, thank you, Richard. So I just wanted to comment that as part of our budget book, there was a separate section put in to talk about strategic plan alignment. So the title is County Strategic Plan and Budget Policies. So we're not forgetting our strategic plan as the focus of why we're doing budgeting and where we're focusing on services, et cetera. So I just wanted to read a couple of things under good governance relative to what's in here, remind everybody of what our strategic plan was. First one is implement systems that improve system-wide process, data sharing, and departmental collaboration. Second one, approach large, complex, and/or system-wide matters as an organization. Richard just talked about a lot of the complexity we deal with, but we're doing it as an organization. Departments will collaborate on projects and efforts that have cross-departmental impacts. And I think that John Vania can attest as well as I can, we're getting a lot more interaction and sharing with a lot of departments, including our planning and building department and our DOT, in terms of what they're thinking about what's happening. We may not be satisfied with what they're doing, But from where I sit, the communication's been a whole lot better than it's been in the past. So I'd rather know about things that aren't happening than wonder if they will ever happen, right? So, because then you can address them. Promote the development of resources to identify and pursue additional revenue. Incorporate benchmarks and best practices to provide context to decisions. Evaluate requests and recommendations based on complete assessment of the best available information, and create and maintain a supportive culture for all employees through staff engagement and policy and process decisions and through strong labor relations. So those are just some of the areas under good governance as part of our strategic plan. And again, they're emphasized as part of our budget process. So we keep trying to reinforce these things and educate people and hopefully encourage more commentary, recognizing the complexity of a lot of things that are involved. So thank you for that, Richard. And let's go to infrastructure. John.
Okay, thank you. As John Davey would say, real quick, what we have on the agenda here is back in March, we looked at and we ultimately recommended denial of the Oak Ridge High School Verizon cell tower. And it was, in our opinion, we did not believe the applicant had all of his ducks in a row in respect to lighting and noise, as well as what they would call a tolling agreement. For our county council's recommendations, we needed to have that in place as well. So we recommended denial, and I believe that's going to be coming to your board, Supervisor Heidel, I believe in July for that. So, we've talked about everything else. Mr. Davey stole my thunder, but that's good. He does a better job than I do on that stuff. So if there's any other comments or questions for me, that's fine.
So I would just like to comment on the Verizon Oak Ridge High School thing. We got a really large amount of input from the high school district that they really are wanting to see this change, this improvement being made, because not only does it provide cellular communications, which a lot of the students are having difficulty in that area getting the proper connectivity speeds, et cetera. So if they're a Verizon customer, this is really going to accelerate that. And then the other thing is just getting better lighting, because the stadium lights, the poles will be extended in height. So you're going to get a better distribution of the light, still focused appropriately, et cetera. So in the review that I went through, there was just a lot of positive comments about the high school really wanting to see the project go forward, consistent with recommendations or requirements the county has. So that will come to the board. I think it's in one of the July meetings, but I'm not sure which one. So
I believe it's July 20th.
July 20th. Okay, thank you. Economic development. When? Oh, excuse me. You got a question, Richard?
Yes, I do. Having mentioned Oak Ridge, rang a bell in my head. Over a year ago, someone from the school district made a presentation to the community council. And I'd asked the question about the school district responding regarding planning proposals that went forward and the impact of housing, et cetera, on the education system and their facilities. And I'm wondering if in the review of the central plan now, has the school district made any input to either the planning commission or to APAC, or are they still kind of just saying that's none of our business?
They don't normally provide comments to the planning commission. It's a rare occurrence, so.
During the distribution, they're invited, but yeah, I think John's right. They very rarely step into that commentary activity. So fire department, totally different. We got to make sure we have the right access and egress and all the things done consistent with best practices and fire safety. So that's a totally different, but there is a large difference in what kind of responses we get from public agencies, such as high school districts. It's the way it works. So.
Okay, answered my question. Thanks.
All right, very good. So not seeing any other. Glenn, tell us what's going on with Pioneer. Send us some information. So
Okay, yeah, I've seen some information on this and did a little look up myself. First of all, CDAC is moving forward with our monthly meetings, and we do meet this Thursday. We're still on Zoom. You can go through the county, through Supervisor Heidel's webpage, through Legistar to get information if you do want to see us. Under our energy alternatives, our pending future energy provider, Pioneer Community Energy, with Supervisor Heidel now sitting on their board, is in the process of creating the Community Programs Advisory Committee. It'll be 7 to 11 members. They're looking for diverse representation across their service area, which is Placer and El Dorado counties. They're looking for a diversity of people's expertise and background, as well as maybe some other issues, all available on their website if anybody wants to look. And so they're looking to potentially add 2 people from El Dorado County to serve on this board. Additionally, energy alternatives, they're continuing to do research on biomass, bioenergy, which could help generate electricity within our county, potentially connecting that to Pioneer Energy. As we talked about when we were sharing information about Pioneer, that there will be future energy opportunities, and this could be one. Let's see, what else are we looking at? Fairgrounds has kind of moved slowly, trying to get some information about pending a review to give them some extra advice and support. And Board of Supervisors on May 18th had a motion passed that they are asking CDAC and the Ag Commission to investigate cultivation of industrial hemp in our county. So of course I immediately got to work and started doing some research. And we will be discussing and adding that to our work plan at our meeting this week and see if that makes economic sense or community benefit for our county. That's kind of a highlight of the things that we're working on, just trying to stay up with, you know, future businesses looking to come into the county, keeping up with plans. We continue to hear a lot about some hotels going up, but we'll wait and see. They're still doing their process, but it will come. It will help the economy. There are some new things coming forward on this part of the county that I think are going to give us more things to do and more fun. And we're going to see the economy really starting to pick up as you're seeing new businesses start, the mom and pop chicken in town center. So there's a lot of new things that are going to be happening. Any questions?
Questions, leadership team?
Well, I'll ask
ahead.
one. Glenn, you guys don't know yet when you'll be able to meet in person, right? So it's still virtual until there's a determination?
It is still virtual. We heard it could be soon. So I asked the economic development folks at the county every time we meet when they'll be able to get us in person. But I think it'll happen.
Good.
So I will comment, the board is still looking at trying to open things up on June 22nd, our board meeting, and allowing certain members of the public to attend. Obviously, we don't know the distancing, spacing requirements yet. I mean, that's all, it's up in the air until we really sort through all these different guidelines and directions and executive orders that may fold out. So we're all waiting to see what those results are, but there's a definite strong interest and a push to get back to more normal public meetings and not having to wear masks and people being in close proximity, i.e. adjacent seats to one another, and getting back to more normal conditions. But no guarantees it's going to happen overnight, because I keep hearing more rumblings of things that just seem to be confusing, because why would they even consider that now? But it's happening. So a lot of different people pull in different directions. So we'll have to wait till the 15th and see what our governor really tells us, or shortly there before. All right, thank you, Glenn. And I did want to emphasize that the county is putting out a press release relative to the CPAC opportunity. And so we'll get that on our social media. We'll include it in our minutes as a link to where anyone who might be interested can find the application form and go and complete it. And it requires a resume to be submitted and a couple of other simple things to fulfill. But we would encourage anyone who has an interest in that particular volunteer service to please so acknowledge by submitting their application, and then the staff at Pioneer is going to review all that, and they will come back with recommendations to the various entities as to who their representatives would be. primarily because they're looking for diversity. So this is different than what I'm familiar with, which basically says a board member gets to identify who they want to fulfill a position. This is going to be more of a collective process with Pioneer taking the lead, looking at maybe, if you look at all of the 2 counties, and then I think it's 8 cities we have now involved, all the applicants, because each county gets 2 representatives, the cities get 1 representative, the way it's identified. And Pioneer staff role is to try to figure out what are the best selections across those with the right allocations, right? To get the most diversity, achieving the things they want, and then they'll come forward with a recommendation, which ultimately board members will have to approve. But it's a different process than establishing an advisory committee at the county level. So that's kind of the new element part of it. But we'll send out the information. I would encourage people to apply if they're so interested, and we'll develop the details after that. So any go backs, anything, anybody on the leadership team that, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a fistful. I'll go real quick, bullet points, just brief for Commissioner Vega. Bass Lake Road, Silver Springs Parkway, open. Bass Lake Road, no traffic detour for now. There's a 3-way stop. Please stop, because the southbound traffic is not on Silver Springs Parkway. They're rolling right through it. On the 9th, Bass Lake Road, 1-lane, single-lane closure at Bridlewood and J7 as J7 Serrano paves their access driveway onto the roadway. The last for the 11th. The Saratoga Finders Way community traffic meeting that Supervisor Heidel mentioned earlier. We do have a date for August 19th. I was surprised that it was going to be that late. I know Supervisor Heidel has some concerns about that, but it took so long trying to getting a response and trying to get that date that we figured we better just grab onto it while we can get it. So that APAC will host. It won't be an APAC meeting. In all likelihood, it'll be virtual. So we don't have a meeting space yet. And I wanted, and we had a very similar community traffic meeting here in the Bass Lake Village community, Woodridge in the Hills. We had about 68 residents show up on a court off of Summer Drive. We had, Chief Johnson was there from EDH Fire. Fire department is very supportive of anything concerning safety, so we can't thank them enough for that. It'll be a very similar thing, I'm hoping, for Saratoga, but DOT showed up. They had a lot of information, and we had a representative from the Highway Patrol. So it was a good turnout. I'm hoping the Saratoga one turns out as well, because I know there's still a lot of questions over there. And I think the last thing I'll throw out is, and I should have done this during public comment, volunteer group for the restoration and preservation of the Eldorado Hills Monument sign along Highway 50 on the south side of the freeway. It's owned by Rolling Hills CSD. They have no money. We have a volunteer group. We've been working on this for about 7 months. edhsign.org. We want your money. You can go there and donate. Anything would be appreciated. We're just trying to get the sign restored. We have a contractor identified, and we're hoping to have that done in the summer. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, John, for those additional comments. So with that, I'm going to move to item 7, which is our council member items. Our next meeting is Monday, July the 12th. We're planning on holding that in the Eldorado Hills Fire Department, Station 85 conference room. We've got an agreement to make that happen, subject to whatever the governor announces on the 15th. But and Chief Lilly acknowledged they have the same kind of requirements. I'm not sure it's going to move forward the way we want. So stay tuned. But that's the plan, is to hold it at the fire station. We haven't discussed the exact time of the start, but I think 5 p.m. is what we made the reservation for. So we're planning on continuing with the earlier starts as opposed to later start in the past. So we started at 7, and I think it just behooves us to get this done earlier, particularly if we got staff involved, because then it's a small extension of their day and not coming back after hours, so to speak. And so I think that's our current plan, but stay tuned. We're not sure how that's going to end up. The guest speaker next month is planned will be Debbie Manning, President and CEO of the Eldorado Hills Chamber. We asked Debbie to explain to us, share with us their plans of what they're calling the 50 Economic Alliance, which includes the city of Folsom and other agencies, the Highway 50 aspects of what they're doing to try to promote economic development. You know, some of you are probably familiar with the Fab 50 and all the other things. Well, this is similar but different. So Debbie's going to explain what that planning in its early stages are all about, and I'm sure solicit our support or help or whatever it is. So I figured that was a good topic to understand in economic development, what our chamber and other local agencies are doing. So that we can look forward to that. And with that, I'm not seeing any hands shaking around for any final comments. So I'm going to adjourn our meeting at 7:01 p.m. this evening. So thank you all for your attendance. I really appreciate it. Keep up all your good work. And you know where to get a hold of us. You know where to get a hold of Cindy anyway. So please do if the need arises. And thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.